I'm sitting here with Dr. Michael Shadow, a name that if you know me, you've heard that name hundreds of times. And what a privilege to be here. And thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for the invitation.
Here we are.
At my age, it's good to be able to get out and do something enjoyable.
Well, this is going to be a ball. We start every podcast, Dr. Shadow, with a word. I think that came out of somewhere and someplace. I've learned that from you. And the word that I've chosen to start this out is charisma. Charisma. Now, I think everybody has an image in their mind of what that looks like and means. But my definition of that is the idea of focused attention combined with enthusiasm and competence, which segues into my version of the very first moment I met you.
I have a feeling I know what's about to come.
Freshman at the University of Washington, fall of 1976. My first class, I don't even remember what it was, but it was in Kane 130 with 600 other freshmen.
Yeah.
It could have been Psych 101, Math 101. I have no idea, but it was a 101 something. And then when that finished, I looked at my little sheet and I went, oh my God, I don't even have to move, because my second class was right there at the same place. Again, a 5-credit 101 distribution requirement class. Somehow I made it through that, anonymously, untouched, and feeling somewhat in place. Freshmen everywhere. The third class, I looked at my schedule, was titled The Rhetoric of Western Thought. If somebody right then and there says, what does that mean? I would have said, I have no idea. None. I couldn't even venture a guess. But it was 5 credits. It wasn't in this room. And so I, with my map, got out and traveled. And it wasn't an easy place to find. It was definitely not in the center of things. But on the 3rd floor of this building, a little bit set aside, I found the room. I thought I was in the right place. I walked in. There were about 30 other students. Every one of them looked smarter than I did. They looked older than I was. And I went, I'm lost. I must be in the wrong place. But being a freshman, not knowing anything, I just sat down. I looked around. Nobody was talking. The bell rang. Still nobody there. And about 10 seconds after the bell rang, the door flew open. And I swear I could go right there, and I promise you I'm telling the truth. But you walked in, and your posture was the first thing I noticed. Your hairstyle, your suit, your shoes were shiny, your jewelry. and you walked up to this podium, and you looked around. There was this it seemed like 60 seconds, probably 5 seconds, this pause. And then you said something, I can't do it perfectly, but it was bold and it was articulate, that said, I am Herr Dr. Michael Shadow. If it's more simplified for your finite minds, you may call me God. And I I looked like you do right now. I went, I literally didn't know what to do. I was just, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. And then you began. And you began with articulation, vocabulary, charisma, enthusiasm, storytelling, something about Cicero and Maimonides, and it just started going. And I'm like, do I write this down? How do you spell this? You know, and and then finally I just set my pencil down and I just listened. And 50 minutes went by in 2 minutes. It was just, and the bell rang and you then said something. Tomorrow, in the year of our Lord, which I'd never heard that expression before, meaning the date of, and we will reconvene. Be on time. And you left. And we were all just sitting there, like in shock. Do you remember that?
I'll answer in this way, Greg. There are two of us sitting here. One of us seems to remember that. Of the two of us.
I think this was normal for you.
Others might say abnormal, but still thank you. It may come with my personality. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And clearly, you had an unhinged professor as your teacher that day. And I now have a question for you. Okay. Why the hell did you come back?
I not only came back, I was early. And as you'll maybe remember, it's been a long time. I mean, let's face it, we're not kids anymore. But I've tried to do the math. You were in your 30s.
Yes.
And I'm like, holy smokes. You know, I mean, I was 18. And so I think, oh my gosh, how do I remember this so well? Well, I not only remember it, I was early. I also can tell you that I took that class not once, but 3 times. I took every class you taught 3 times.
Did you fail it twice?
No, I did well in. I did well in them.
Got it.
No, but the same class, I didn't get credit for it again. I just knew I didn't hear everything you said. I knew there was no way to take this all in. And I'm not sure I got it all after 3 times each, but one thing I can absolutely tell you is that I have listened to thousands of speakers and teachers, and I've still never heard anything like the way you communicate. You held us all in just the edge of our seat, the engagement, the charisma of how you teach. I've never seen it before or again. And I'll tell you, you talk about a high bar in trying to communicate with people. It was a gift to me. As importantly, the content. This is where the perfect storm came to be in my world, because I had the philosopher A.B. Label, who taught me so much about life and business from a philosophical standpoint. I had met when I was 18 Tom Newman, who was a finance, negotiation, deal structuring brainiac in the world of real estate. What a windfall. And then coming to your classes, the interpreted topic, the way I took away, was the art of negotiation. And it became a trifecta of a trade school for me. I would leave your class and I would go try this stuff. I would try, okay, today all I'm thinking about is primacy effect. Or today I'm going to see if I can have them insert a minor premise in a syllogism. And I would try. And I would test, and I'd come back, and I'd learn more, and I'd go try it again. Or I'd be thinking, okay, the language of my audience, pay close attention. And I would go try to employ, I would try to mirror, I'd try to, all of the things that the combination of your classes taught me were a trade school for what I was doing every day while in college, which was buying real estate. Mm-hmm. And we've discussed this, but it was like a milkshake that had 3 parts that who would have thought? But wow, for what I was doing, it was the perfect blend. So the question then reverses itself, like, what brought you to that day, that class in 1976 at the University of Washington as my professor? I want you to go back, if you would, and I will shut up, to way back here, and the journey of academia for you, the journey of your path that led you to the University of Washington on that day and that time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm 81 years old, and that path has been long and convoluted. And if 70 years ago you had asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, the answer would have been a Catholic priest. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that was my first career goal. Mm-hmm. I entered the seminary when I was a freshman in high school and exited that life 10 years later.
A freshman in high school?
Mm-hmm.
What is a freshman in high school? 14 years old?
Probably 16.
16, okay.
And that education experience, I had gone through parochial school for elementary, mm-hmm. and now I was entering a seminary for high school and university. And my training was a classical Western European education. My major was philosophy. Mm-hmm. The languages were Latin mm-hmm. and Spanish. And the Latin part, because at that time, the Catholic Church's official language for all of its rituals was Latin. Mm-hmm. And so I had 6 years of Latin constantly. Mm-hmm. I had 4 years of Greek. Mm-hmm. And I had Spanish because I was studying to be a priest in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, where a large number of Roman Catholics are Spanish-speaking people. Mm-hmm. And so I had this classical background, mm-hmm. and I loved it. Mm-hmm. So I loved ancient history. I loved Greek history and Roman history and medieval. I loved everything up to about 1588. And after that, I sort of lost interest. So my whole focus was the ancient Western European world. Mm-hmm. Eventually, it became clear to me that the priesthood was not the career for me. So I was studying in Rome at the time when I decided I'm going to leave this life and go in search of some kind of different career. And I returned to my parents' home in Los Angeles. I hadn't a clue now as to what I wanted to be when I grew up. Remember I said I started wanting to be a priest from the first grade on. And in fact, I don't think I've ever shared this with you. At the age of 6 years old, I joined the Future Priest Club of America, the FPCA. I had a pen pal in a seminary in Southern California to whom I would write, and he would write back. And we'd go on visits to the seminary. So at the age of 6, I was planning my career. Wow. And at the age of early 20s, I decided this career is not mine. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Came back to Los Angeles, didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. And friends of mine and my parents said, well, you've already been through university once. You haven't a clue as to what you want to do. Why don't you enroll in El Camino Junior College?
Oh my gosh.
I said, what's a junior college?
Right.
My whole background had been Catholic education.
Yeah.
I hadn't a clue about what the options were in public education. Turned out to be the greatest choice in my life. When I started enrolling at El Camino Junior College, they said, what courses do you want to take? I said, I haven't a clue. They said, well, why don't you try a basic? And they listed up a number of courses, one of which was a basic speech course.
You taking a basic speech course?
Yes.
There's humor in that.
Yeah. Ironic, isn't it?
It is ironic. Yeah.
And this may surprise you, Greg, but I was darn good in that basic speech course.
I was going to say, I would be intimidated if I were the instructor.
And no intimidation, but the instructor was great.
Huh.
And I got a lot of positive feedback. And I think that's one of my great learnings in my life, is that, first of all, about myself, I respond positively, powerfully to positive feedback. I turn into myself and wilt when I get negative feedback. I got positive feedback from my performances. I always got suggestions for improvement, but they were always framed in a very positive way. They were always framed as, you have tremendous potential, you're great. And here's the next level for you. So it's framed as growth. And I am to this day very grateful to Dr. Buck and Dr. Kane at El Camino Junior College. They took an interest in me. They realized that I didn't know where my path would take me now. And so they helped take goals, helped me set some goals. They said, why don't you go for a master's degree? And I said, okay, that's fine, in speech communication. And there's where a connection was made, because one of the basic core education opportunities and topic areas and research areas in the field of speech communication is rhetoric and public address. Part of that field is ancient Greek rhetoric.
Takes you way back, right?
Ancient Roman rhetoric, medieval rhetoric, early church Christian fathers rhetoric, and all the way through to contemporary and modern rhetoric. Because of my background and my love of antiquity and the studies of antiquity, I had a fit. And so I got my master's degree in Greek rhetoric. Got an offer from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, to study ancient Greek rhetoric, Roman rhetoric, medieval rhetoric, anything I wanted to at Illinois. And Illinois had what, at that time, at least, and maybe still is, I think the #1 library in classical studies, particularly in the area of rhetoric. They had built up a tremendous support system of original manuscripts for people who wanted to research and study the ancient arts and recommendations of persuasion.
Persuasion. Define that in terms we would understand today.
Here's how I define it for me in my life. It's the art of making something you believe in and believe is good and helpful come alive in the life of another person. The art of making an idea, a concept, a program, an initiative, a proposal, which you believe will benefit people, come alive in the life of other people. Why do we need this art? Because most of us can't do it on our own. We need other people to come into agreement with us. The study in antiquity of doing that and how it's done and what are the elements involved in that dynamic is the art of rhetoric. And Aristotle, of whom I am a great fan, said that rhetoric is the art of discovering all of the available means of persuasion. It is a mental discipline. It is discovering all the available means of persuasion. Now, here is where I make an additional comment, and it's simply this. Aristotle never says using all of the available means of persuasion.
Discovery.
The art is discovering. The question then becomes, after discovery, what's the ethical use? Which of these techniques, which of these concepts in this situation are ethically appropriate? Aristotle, and that's why for centuries after print, Aristotle's rhetoric was almost always bound together with his work on ethics. Today, the two have separated. And so the art of persuasion gets very clearly is not the right word, smoothly gets morphed into manipulation.
Right.
And so we have this view that persuasion is manipulation. And during those years that we were together at the University of Washington, I was asked to create a course on techniques of persuasion. Interesting enough, the women in our graduate school would not take the course. Only the guys immediately. And I then discovered there was a gender base here of attitude toward what persuasion was. The guys seemed to have no problem with persuasion, even if it meant manipulation. The women, their model they used in their head was collaboration, cooperation. And that gave me access then to the work of Dr. Deborah Tannen on gender-based differences in language usage. And her concept is simply that depending on the gender you are, or at least people perceive you to be, you learn a separate model, a specific model about what communication is. And the guys learn communication is one-upmanship. It's constantly the ability to come out first. So guys play with the kids. Boys, who knows the most batting statistics for every baseball player on your local team? And you one-up each other. And so Dr. Tannen says that model, the guy model, is the report-making model. We go with information, fact, and the person who wins is the one who has the best information and the most and keeps pushing it.
Right.
With girls, the model is different. The last thing Dr. Tannen says that a girl wants is to stand out separate from the rest of her friends. It's cooperation, it's collaboration.
We found this.
We found that, absolutely.
Right.
And she calls that model the rapport-making model. So
fascinating.
I feel I've gone a little off track here.
Not
The
really.
art of discovering all the available means of persuasion. There's another art of analyzing the means in order to decide which are the ethically best means possible. And the ones that aren't ethically viable, you don't use. In Western education, as disciplines became more complex, departments formed. And knowledge and information was compartmentalized. And so ethics went to philosophy. Rhetoric went to speech communication. Which meant from then on, you were very fortunate if the two married in your life somewhere.
I remember it was a game changer for me simply because we have this definition in our head of what the word persuasion means. At least in today's vernacular, I think most people would say, "Oh, I'm teaching persuasion." It has a negative connotation. It is manipulation they're thinking on. But I remember that you talked about Aristotle's quote of discovering all available means of persuasion, and I remember you saying, think in today's words, think agreement. That to reach this state of persuasion meant we have found a place to agree. Versus manipulation, something has been done to you.
Correct.
You didn't agree, but they did this to me, or he or she did this to me, and I've really appreciated that because one feels that ethics are attached. Agreement, we have decided that this is in our best interest. And in the world of real estate, we create agreements. And I say, okay, well, it is your job, according to Aristotle, and all those who aspire to negotiate well, to discover all available means of agreement, which means asking the questions people may not know to ask, turning over every stone on the beach to see what are the puzzle pieces that we can look at to form an agreement that is mutual, ethical, beneficial to everybody. And that was the takeaway back then. And so the components of how do you discover that? What is the discovery of those all available means of agreement became the core work of so much of what I remember of your classes and what I would practice. And so I have a trick I'm going to play on you right now. You're going to love it, and it's premeditated. I'll just tell you that right now. Okay?
Okay, go ahead. I've taken my meds. I'm ready for it.
Okay. One of the things I remember you making me very, very aware of was what you phrased the language of your audience. And you would sit with me and say, okay, you're going off to meet a seller after class. Yes. Okay, well, I want you to be aware of these clues of the language, these clues of the language of your audience. And so let's just say you came to the door, you were that person, I'm the property owner, and I answered the door. I answered the door just like you see me right now. I answered the door. What are the clues? What would you say? Tell me what you would be thinking just by the very first hello introduction, what would you say?
God, he's preppy looking.
Right.
Okay?
Yes, right.
I'm being facetious.
No, I remember I'm baiting you.
I'm looking for cues as to what your values are.
Right. Okay.
Do I see a wedding ring on? Do I hear children in the house? Do I see toys out
Yes.
in the yard? Do I see political signs
Right.
out in the yard? Are there flowers in the garden?
Yes.
Or is it sculpture, or is it just all rock and concrete?
Exactly. Right.
Okay.
So if I answered the door, and instead of having this nice blue sweater on, if I answered the door, and this is what I'm wearing.
I would immediately think he hates flamingos. Michael, don't talk about flamingos.
I was looking for something to wear, and I thought, I have to take this out of my closet just
No,
for
you
that
don't.
soundbite.
That was a choice. You chose to take it out of your closet for some perverse reason.
I did. I thought, but this is exactly what so benefited me by what I learned, because the door opens, and there was a movie once. I don't remember when it came out, but the whole premise was whoever was on this side had a freeze button. They could go hit this remote, and everything froze. The people froze, everything froze. And they were able to wander around with everybody frozen to take in all the clues, and then he would come back to wherever he was and unfreeze. But now he had a much bigger picture. I thought, oh my God, that's what I do every day, except I can't freeze everybody.
You got it.
Right? And yet everything you just said, it's the language, the attitude, I can say it almost to exactly your words, the attitudes, predispositions, beliefs, these, who am I speaking with? Who are they? What do they think?
Right.
Where do you go? Where do you avoid? What's our common language? In our world, Dr. Shadow, of communication as it is today, is anybody aware of that on a day in and day out basis? That your language has to be customized?
There are people.
There are.
Absolutely. Dr. Cialdini, who was at one time, I believe, at Arizona State University, and now heads his own Cialdini Institute. All of that research on the principles of social influence. It's all language-based.
Persuasion, right?
Persuasion, exactly. What can we control? Ourselves. I cannot directly control your brain. All I can control is myself. And part of that is the words I choose to use while speaking with you. The order in which I present those words is absolutely critical, because what I say first frames what you hear second and third. And so just the art of sequencing your remarks is part of communicating. The words themselves. Then there's the vocal delivery.
It's like an orchestra.
Exactly.
It all adds one to the other, and when it all comes together, i.e. the first time I ever saw you, it was overwhelming.
Okay.
It was overwhelming. I'd never seen it before. All come together.
And so you're the conductor of your orchestra. And your orchestra are what I call your communication cues. And they fall into 3 categories. They interact dynamically. What people see, and those are those flamingos with the rifles. It's that kind of sweater. It's the color I see. It's your eye contact. You're talking to me. Where are you looking? Ever been to a political fundraiser?
Yes.
And a candidate has come up, shook your hand.
Looking over your shoulder.
Exactly. You look at their eyes and you realize their eyes are not looking directly at you.
Right.
They're looking over your shoulder. You'll get a meaning for that, I bet.
Absolutely.
Such as, this person's more interested in what's happening behind me, someone more important,
Exactly.
next person,
Yep.
she or he is not listening to me.
Right.
It's just eye contact, but it's powerful.
Powerful.
We have meanings for these. So there are the visual cues, what people see. There are the vocal cues, how we deliver, the rate at which we speak. Pitch. 3 kinds of pitches. Upward, downward, sustained. Each type has different meanings. My name is Michael Shadow. It doesn't sound like I know my name. I went up at the end. My name is Michael Shadow. I went down.
Confident.
Who's in control of your pitch?
Yeah. I'm the orchestra conductor.
Now you are the conductor of your cues. I'm out in the audience. Audience level, center, 5th row up. I have meanings for what I hear and see, and the notes your orchestra presents, the words you use.
Well, I think it is, you've made it so clear, the idea of these skill sets become tools to help move from point A to point B. But it starts with creating an agreement, a way that people have created a collaboration attitude, an attitude. His connecting with you, just in his first address, Professor Shadow, immediately bound you. It spoke to his respect of you. He knew who you were. He knew what you did. He saw you in that way. You know, I ask that question a lot. How does your audience see themselves?
Yes.
How do you, which really enters into this next topic, but one of the things that was so valuable that you taught was entering into any objective or negotiation of any kind, the analysis of pre-existing momentum, which is really, what direction are they going already? How do they see themselves already? Where is their momentum? And it's almost like judo. The more the momentum, the easier it becomes, because they're providing all the energy. You just have to, all the energy is there. You just have to know how to direct that. But the pre-existing momentum concept, you've walked into some consulting situations that had a lot of pre-existing momentum, and they were like, help Mr. Wizard, how do we turn this from this to this? Knowing what you're starting with is a critical ingredient of negotiation. People's attitudes around certain things, cultural attitudes around certain things. Certain cultures don't believe in financing anything, for example. They pay all cash, they sell all cash. You just, when you know that going in, it helps you know that, well, you've got to contend with this pre-existing condition. Clues that you get about attitudes and political parties and what's happened in their life give you a clue to what direction the boat's already going.
Yes.
Talk about that, the importance of analyzing that pre-existing momentum.
The question is not, never lead with a negative, okay? Mm-hmm. The question is exactly as you framed it. What is the momentum? The question is not, is there a momentum? There's always context. How do we discover it? Well, one of the best ways is talk to them.
Listen to their language.
Listen to their language. Now, that gets us into, say, that whole area of research known as neurolinguistic programming, where the model suggests that each of us in our brains has developed since childhood a preference. I'm going to call it a profile for how we prefer to receive other communication. The three that neurolinguistic programming identify are people who prefer to learn visually, people who prefer to learn auditorially, and people who prefer to learn kinesthetically. Well, when I'm talking with people, I listen to the words they use to decide, are they processing me visually at the moment, auditorially, or kinesthetically?
Michael, I see it going like this.
You got it. All right?
Visual.
Visual. That's right. If I asked you, what was the first thing you heard when you entered the meeting? And you respond, well, I saw Helen was sitting at the end of the table this time. I'm in the wrong mode. I got to change real quick. Because you're processing the requests visually.
Right.
Tell me more about where she was seating and what you saw there. Word choice.
Right.
So visual, auditory, kinesthetic. If I said to you, Pinneo, you and your team need to get a handle on this problem, and you need to get a handle on it now.
Right.
What mode am I in? Visual, auditory, or kinesthetic? You will respond to me how? Well, I see your point, Michael. No, because Michael will believe the hell you see my point.
Right.
You don't sound like you see my point.
I'm going to take the bull by the horns,
You got
Michael. I've got it.
You got it.
Now we're communicating. I've responded in the language you've predicted. We're on the same frequency. It's almost like a radio channel. You gotta both be on 16 to talk to each other. Right.
I remember doing a neurolinguistic programming assessment with clients of mine who were staff for a city. And this staff had to every month make presentations to the city council. Well, there's one council member who they had labeled in their minds as rather cantankerous, always putting obstacles up, very difficult to deal with, and they didn't like her. When we did the assessment and they were sharing back their profiles, I said, okay, earlier today you talked about each of the council members and you identified what you saw and felt and heard was the most cantankerous and the hardest one to deal with. What style is that person? And so they started sharing her requests from them. And the pattern that came out was a pattern of word choice, which was simply visual, 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 visual. I want to see it. I want to see the photographs. If this is a site, show me. If this is a permit request, I want to see the site. Now, the kinesthetics on the council will say, field trip. Let's go out and directly experience that site.
Right.
And see and experience it ourselves. The visuals will say, got any photographs? Got a video of it? Pictures of it? Let me see it. So after we talked a little more about this particular council member's communication style, we did an exercise to create a presentation for her based upon her listening style, based upon our communication style, which also turned out to be her listening style. And she started becoming much easier to work with.
Arguing with her with words was only going to increase the problem.
Yeah, it's the wrong medium, words, sound.
Right.
I mean, she hears.
Field trips.
In a sense,
no, we're not going to go do anything.
I
need to see it first.
That's right.
Right. Okay.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so paying attention just to the words the other person are using.
Right.
Visual, auditory, kinesthetic. Are you sensing a pattern?
Yeah.
If so, always respond in the same mode. A number of my colleagues at the University of Washington over the years have shared with me that they believe that maybe 60% of communication-based problems in married, committed relationships is simply one of the partners is in one of these modes and the other partner is constantly in a different mode. You never listen to me, dear. I see your point. It's like they're passing ships in the night. The brain is not saying, oh, I believe you.
Right.
The brain is hearing it, but it's not processing it in the mode in which
there can be agreement.
There can be agreement. You got it. So being in the mode, the listening mode, communication preferred listening mode of the other person doesn't guarantee agreement, but it does eliminate a lot of potential barriers on the path to agreement.
One of the things that I have concluded many, many years ago is the sum of the total of everything we're talking about in communication, creating agreement, negotiation, that it's a skill set that I think people for the most part are unaware of, and they say things to me like, oh, I get along with people, I talk well with people, I don't need to know that. They sort of disqualify the depth of technique and awareness and value of this because they just don't know. I've had people use a phrase that just cracks me up. Oh, I do good phone. Like, what does that mean? It sounds terrible, but their batting average is low. These techniques allow for connection. They allow that we're on the same frequency. How important from there, once you get on the same frequency, once you've identified the language of your audience, talk for a moment about creating small agreements, even if they're unstated, rapport, as it were. We agree on these things. We have this in common. We're on the same page here. Even unstated, how important is it to create small agreements on the path to a bigger proposition?
From the model in my brain, it's very important. Because it is, like any kind of construction, it's incremental. I've always thought we build on what we have in common. The project of building may take quite a while because the agreements are rather small. Yet we adhere to them and we're building trust. They are beginning to trust us. We were successful here. We are trusting them. So the element of trust builds. Are we in agreement? Word choice. Greg, what's your opinion of this proposal? Greg, give me some feedback. Greg, I would like your advice. Which of those three builds community, brings together?
I'd like your advice.
You got it.
Yeah. It's not offensive. It doesn't put me on edge. What are you going with this? It's you seeking to be better, you seeking an answer. But what you learn is my position on something.
Correct.
Right.
And we're together on it.
We are.
If I ask for your opinion, you're going to give it.
Right.
But there's no bond between us.
And there's no guarantee that that's going to bring us together.
Correct.
Right.
Give me your feedback. Still,
Yeah.
one-way communication,
Right.
it doesn't bring us together.
Right.
And you'll say, oh, I thought you fell short here. I thought you were okay here.
No way of undoing that once you've gone there too.
Yep. Once it's said, it's done.
Right. Yeah.
And they're in sound communication words, there's no delete button.
Right. Can't edit it.
You can't edit before you send it.
Yeah. Right.
And, I think we've all been in the situation where we have punched the send button and thought, oh my God.
I asked a lady
I
once.
want it back right now.
I came up to a lady who was a total stranger once at the grocery store, and I go, oh my gosh, when are you due? And she looked at me like, what do you mean, when am I due? And she wasn't pregnant. She just had a large tummy. Couldn't unring that bell.
Nope. Once it's said, it is done. And so print and digital communication does still give us some control if people would just be their own copy reader and not rush to punch the send button.
Right.
Because there is that control factor. And depending on how good a person's frontal lobe is operating at a given moment, there is that kind of, do I really want to say this? Element. Yet once it's said, it's done.
In the world, Dr. Shadow, of ice climbing, you don't put weight on that until you plunge, you test, you push, and then you go, okay, this is going to support my weight now. Now I can take this step. And then I test, I gently, and then, okay. To me, communication, especially negotiation when you don't know your audience, the bold statements, the declarations, or the questions that are sort of directive, wow, you don't know enough to put any weight on that yet. Whereas if you ask, give me your advice, as you said, now you're learning. I think some of the greatest negotiators, they really know how to very subtly just discover and ask questions, but not feel like they're interrogating people, but they're collecting.
Yes.
So that when they do put weight on something, they know it's going to hold it. They can build off of that. They know I have agreement here. I have buy-in. I know we're on the same page. And starting this out with solid steps, especially right out of the gate, is critical. Yeah.
Yeah.
The primacy effect, the recency effect. Talk to me about those. They're so powerful in my world.
The concept here is simply people tend to remember what they've heard first and what they have heard last.
And or seen.
Or seen. That is correct. Now, the primacy effect is simply what you say first generally can get remembered. When you're talking, making a presentation, in terms of what you say, the people are going away from the meeting remembering maybe 10% of what you said. Your job is to make sure it's the 10% you wanted them remembering. Therefore, beginnings and endings of the presentation are very important. Let's talk about primacy for a moment. The primacy is simply, what do you say first? It is important because people remember it, but also because that's your frame. The brain of a listener frames our message before it's ever heard our message. The moment we start a meeting, every brain at that meeting is framing what they think you are about or your message is about. You and I don't have direct access to those cognitive functions.
Probably a good thing.
To our own, we have.
Right.
But to them, we don't. So the question becomes, what we know about our audience for this report at this meeting, how do I begin it? How do I frame it? The framing is simply everyone's brain saying, in the here and now, what's her message going to be about? The brain frames your message before it's heard it. In the here and now, what's this probably going to be about? That's why your opening statements become so critical, because you're answering the question, this is what it's about. This is what it's going to be about. And so framing language is almost always value language. Whose value? Hopefully theirs as well as yours.
Right.
Value words, framing words. This is a matter of accountability. This is a matter of getting a favorable return on your investment. This is a matter of ensuring a legacy for your grandchildren. This is a matter of security. This is a matter of freedom. This is a matter of responsibility. This is a matter of sustainability. About 7 years ago, I was giving a conference for a nonprofit organization in Central Washington, a fabulous organization, and I believe it's 5 counties are involved in this nonprofit, benefiting communities in Central Washington. So I've been asked to come to Lake Chelan, and do this conference for them. Wonderful. It's a beautiful site, and they're a great group.
Good wine.
And good wine. You got it. So it is a perfect setting.
Right.
And I'm talking about the nonprofit framing its message. And I have a handout. And I've distributed the handout. Part of the handout has framing words, Many of those words I just said are in that handout. But there's one I haven't yet said. It's the word God. This is a matter about doing the will of God. Now, I realize that God is a powerful frame for a message. I had God on my list, and it was the last framing example word on the list. Well, during the break, one of the participants comes up to me, and he says, "You're a liberal from Seattle, aren't you?" We could do another podcast on all the implications involved in just those words.
Right.
But I buy the label and said, "Guilty. What gave me away?" He said, "God gave you away." And I said, "How did God do that?" He said, "You have God last on your list. God must always come first." And, oh my
God. Right.
I was just happy I had God on the list.
Yeah, right.
But here was a gentleman, I suspect, frames almost every proposal, proposition, message was, is it the will of God?
Through the God box.
Yeah, that's right. So if I had that handout with me today, God be on the list. But tell me where God is on the list.
Number one for
You
him.
got it.
You're right.
God is now number one on my list, too. Okay?
Right.
What is safe? This is about what? And so
Yeah.
people will they need the brain needs the frame. And if you and I don't help the brains in the room frame our message at the get-go, they're going to frame it anyway. And it may not be the frame most conducive to hearing, analyzing, encoding our message the way we wanted it understood.
Question. When you walk into a room and they go, "Oh, this is Michael Shadow," and they've done their research. They say, "Well, this is who you are." And you know that, let's just say. I walk into a group, "Oh, you're a real estate investor," right? That's what I am. And because I speak to a lot of groups around the country about real estate education, "Oh, you're a real estate investor guru selling me books and tapes and educational material."
Okay.
That's their pre-existing frame. I kind of know that going in. They're used to it. The last 10 people fit the frame beautifully. So I come in, and how important is it to be aware of the pre-existing attitudes of an audience or a group in constructing your primacy, in fact, your first words, the way you appear, what you wear, the everything about how you first present yourself. How much more important is that when you know that they have a pre-existing attitude about you?
Okay. Wonderful question, simply because the answer is you got to do your homework because it's critical. Where do you go? You go to the words that have been used to describe you in their literature, in the announcement, in their local newsletter, in the organizational announcement, whether it's in print or it's digital, on phones, however it is, get it. Do your homework and discover all of the words that are used to identify who you are, including your name. The moment people hear or see Greg Pinneo, what did they think about you?
Do you really want to know?
Yeah.
Well, Well, they would, if they had never heard of that before, if it's not like a referral or something,
No.
they would
It's just
research
the
that,
words.
and they would go and they'd Google it, and they would say, oh, real estate investor, teacher, this, that. They'd see all these words. But then at some point they would run into, oh, he's been to prison. He's been investigated by the Department of Financial Institutions. And all of a sudden, their perception is, guru, teacher, but really bad guy. That's what a surface level research would say, and I'm used to that.
Okay.
I'm ready for that because that's just how people research these days. Yeah.
You've even gone deeper than I was intending. Because the moment you hear Greg Pinneo, you think you know the guy. It's a guy.
Right. Oh, yeah. Right out of the gate. You bet.
Pinneo. Well, it doesn't sound Asian. Nor does Pinneo sound of African origin. Middle Eastern origin? No. They think you're European, possibly. Okay. The question becomes, is Pinneo a name that sounds like mine?
No, likely not.
No. And I've worked a lot with people whose last names are multisyllabic, and their audience's last names are not. And so we have to plan for that.
Right.
How do you deal with that? How do you present it in a way that's comfortable and people won't put up barriers? First technique I use is I simply get all the words that I know have been used to describe me. And I get pile of paper. Okay, I'm old-fashioned. Paper, pencil. I write a dominant label at the top. I put a line down, so I have two columns. One column, I identify assets. The other column, liabilities.
Right.
Okay, Michael Shadow. Sounds male. Male. Assets. Liabilities. No one's met in the audience has met me yet, but my image has already started because they've read or heard words used to describe me. I'm trying to discover what might be out there in their brains the moment I walk into the room, or it's even there before I walk in the room. So I'm doing my discovery. The critical labels. One has to do with gender, probably, or could be. Gender can be important. I was doing a conference many years ago for a women in business, and there were hundreds of women attending the conference. It was wonderful. I was giving a presentation on persuasion skills for women. I walked in, started the session, and a woman stands up, middle of the room, grabs all of her stuff, and walks out and slams the door. I thought, well, I've been rejected before, but this is a little sooner than it normally happens. So I went out and found her. And I said, okay, something happened. And she said, I said, are you willing to share with me? Because I want to make sure everything's all right. And she said, you're a guy. And I don't think there's anything a guy can tell a woman about persuasion skills for a woman. Gender. Meanings for it.
Wow.
So, use your name. And UW professor. Assets, expertise, probably. I get that. Bookish.
Dr. Michael Shadow.
Yes.
Extreme expertise.
Yeah, you got it. Now, if I said Dr. Michael Shadow, comma, PhD, that's overdoing. But anyway, I won't go there.
Right. Right. But
It's
some
one or
people
the other, but
feel
you
the
got
difference.
it.
Right.
That's credential it. There are assets that come with it, and there are liabilities. Here's what happened to me when I didn't do that homework. Dr. Shadow, a group of politicians asked me to come and give a seminar on political speaking for them. And the participants didn't know I was going to be there. So there was no information sent out by the leadership prior to my session at the conference. The Speaker of the House gets up and says, "Today we have Dr. Michael Shadow from the University of Washington, who's come here to tell us how to win an election."
Oh, geez.
How do you like them words?
I can see you in the background going, "Oh boy, is that what I was told?"
Sidebar here, always write your own introduction.
Right, yeah.
With your audience in mind. So what am I talking to? I'm talking to the winners.
Right.
I mean, these are people who already won.
Right.
I hadn't prepared for that kind of introduction. And so I get out and I say things like, well, I've reviewed the caucus's voting record, and I think it's financially responsible and socially adequate, or something like that. And a House member stands up and at the top of his voice screams, "I don't have to sit here and be lectured at," and stomps out.
Oh my God.
I had been framed.
Right.
And it wasn't the right frame for that audience. Everything that was said was absolutely true. But it was the wrong truth for them to hear.
Right.
For them to be open to my message. And so the moment I started speaking, that frame, based on my introduction, inspired this one person to feel, I assume, PhD lecturing at us. And stopped out. Now, if I had done my analysis, I could have preempted that introduction, even if I hadn't written my own. If I had actually done what I preached for that session, I would have had the tools necessary to offset that introduction. Because an analysis of that audience would say, these are the people who won last election. An analysis would indicate, but they're very suspicious about this coming election because the opposition party is developing is taking the new communication technologies and attacking us constantly in all of our races. And we're still at the place where we're arguing over how many yard signs does so-and-so get, and do you have money for a commercial on television, and not doing any of the access the modern technology is now making available. So they're scared. What do they want from a presenter? An academic? Not in this case. We're talking about survival in a highly contested election. This is during the Reagan period. And so we want someone who is street smart.
Right.
We want someone who's fought battles and got bloodied and knows how to win.
Guerrilla.
We want we want a guerrilla tactics.
Right. Yeah.
Who knows how to fight and fight dirty if necessary.
Right.
Now, do the words Professor Shadow you immediately say gutter fighter? He's gotten bloodied with the best of them.
Right.
No. Ivory tower.
Right.
Remote.
Right.
Theory.
Theoretical.
No practice.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
If I had done my homework and spent time analyzing the pre-existing conditions that walked into that room,
You could have
with
called
this
it out
group,
right there.
I could have said,
I know what you're thinking.
that's the idea. And if I had received that frame introduction and had done my homework, I could say, ladies and gentlemen, everything the speaker just said is absolutely true. Guilty, PhD. Guilty, professor. Guilty, University of Illinois, University of Washington. But you know what? None of that's important. What you need to know is whether you can trust me. Do I have any experience in winning elections? The answer is yes, I do. I've been involved in 12 congressional elections, and we have won 10 of them. Every time we have won against the people who have been hired to go against you. So I know what they're going to say about you, and I know when they're going to say it. And together we can preempt.
Yeah.
We can inoculate.
Yeah.
We can win.
The guy that walked out would have stood up and started clapping.
Right, but regrettably, that's not what happened. Just because I hadn't done my homework.
So much to this. So much to this that I have appreciated taking these concepts to the street of my industry, to what I do day in and day out. But everything that I look at and frame in the world of everything, it all comes back to these concepts. It's almost as if, like, for example, the field of marketing, that entire field. In the center of marketing, there's a proposition somewhere. They want you to do something, right? But
yes.
But analysis of your audience, language, framing, pre-existing momentum, all of the production of how do we present this proposition. To me, the education that I receive from you is so core to so many levels of business, but life. We ask life questions all the time. We're always trying to negotiate what we want in life. And to me, I think, God, I just break it down to go, well, all of these skill sets of analysis and creating a proposition and trying to move it in the direction you want your life to go fall under this bucket of pause, have skills to break it down, and think clearly about how to get from here to here in the most effective way. Somebody described it recently that negotiation is not checkers, it's chess. And I believe that there's negotiations that are multi-dimensional chessboards. That, you know, the moving of a piece, hang on to it, walk all around it, think about the language of your audience, think about their receiving style, think about their frequency, think about that, because once you let go of that one move, you live with it or die with it.
Yes.
Right.
That can happen.
That intention around this art form is critical. I want to shift gears and go backwards, and I want you to tell a story you told me years ago about receiving. It was at your time in the Vatican, a very special gown that those priests, I believe, that were there got fitted for a special Italian gown that I can't remember the manufacturer, but do you remember the name of that gown maker?
I want to say
it's like
Grimaldi or Garibaldi,
something like that.
It was the Pope's cassock maker, and the gown is a cassock. If I'm vaguely recalling,
yes,
it's to the greater good that I never went forward in that career, okay? Because I never bought cassocks off the rack. They were all tailor-made.
Oh, tailor-made.
Bespoke cassocks. There are two kinds, at least at that time. One is called a semi-Jesuit cassock, and that's the kind that flaps over and it's put together by a sash. Then there's called a Roman cassock. That has, 39 buttons that go from your big toe up to your neck. But now we have zippers, yes. And I wore cufflinks.
Optional?
Optional, yeah. Well, no. No. I mean, look at what I'm dressed in now. You talked about the visual cues. Mm-hmm. They're frequently the first ones that kick in the moment you enter a room. Mm-hmm. 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 When I turned 70, I saw myself in the mirror one day and said, oh, this is not good. Okay. Shadow, the moment you enter a room and someone looks up and sees you, what do you want going on in their brain? Oh, God, there's another overweight, balding guy. Or, gee, I love your shirt.
Right.
I went with, gee, I love your shirt.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And those are the responses I get.
Right.
Visual cues are the first cues.
Part of the primacy effect. Right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
yeah.
I made these dress choices. Well, as I think back on my life, I was doing this even when I was in the seminary. Mm-hmm. I had French cuffs, but they weren't a full shirt. They were falsies. They were shirts, French cuff sleeves that were cut off here, and there's elastic around them. So you just slip them on and didn't have to wear a full shirt under your cassocks. I believe I had the largest cufflink collection of any seminarian in the seminary. People would line up on Sundays just to make choices for their French cuffs. By the way, one of the cues I constantly look these days, have for decades, when I'm meeting or working with a Catholic prelate or Anglican, is, are they wearing cufflinks or not?
No judgment, but you
notice.
Yeah,
there's a lot of judgment,
right.
And this is not the place to go into that. But if you notice, the former Pope always wore cufflinks, French cuffs and cufflinks. The present Pope, button shirts.
Which says something about?
Which, for me, it does.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
For me, that's a visual cue that gives me at least some initial information about what kind of attitudes may be here in existence. And it's through the interaction that I discover whether I'm way off mark or I'm right on mark or somewhere in between. But I acknowledge that I have these things in my brain. And
the awareness of these things, though, is truly comes to a very practical playing themselves out. I can give you an example that, depending on whatever vehicle I'm driving, I have a change of clothing, not full clothing, but something simple in each of the vehicles. I've learned, you driving down the road in a Mercedes, and the phone rings and it's, "Hey Greg, this is Jesse." I don't know who this is, but they've responded to a bird letter, and I immediately, "Hey Jesse, how are you today?" And we proceed quickly to set up a meeting in a half an hour. And I'm in a Mercedes. And well, I go to where I have to go to his home or wherever I'm meeting him, but I park a half a block away. and I take off my sport coat and I put on a Carhartt coat. Completely purposeful. That when I walk in, it's Jesse. And there he is in his flannel shirt and, the deer head on the wall, and or the awareness to say, okay, hey, Jesse, how are you doing today? And in the background, I hear on a summer day at, 1 p.m, I hear, and the pitch swung on. I can hear a ball game up on the TV, middle of the day on a Wednesday, way too loud. Okay, Jesse's older. He can't hear very well. He's sitting there in a lazy boy watching a ball game at 1 o'clock on a Wednesday. Hey, Greg, it's Jesse. I can put a picture together and immediately start moving toward who's my audience. So that when I walk in, I'm not only walk in feeling like I'm dressed right. I'm not showing a Mercedes. If I was in an old truck, I'd have pulled right up front, right? I've stopped to get some bad beer, the animal beer, and put it on the table, and oh, good, you brought beer. I could hear you knew that. That's what I learned in your class. That awareness of reading things, of seeing it and creating of how does someone see themselves, or what clues or cues are they giving me that I can immediately start getting in that boat and then go from there. To me, that bit of knowledge has practicing it has changed everything I do in real estate. The customization. Once I get to know somebody's currency, I'll go to see Dan Smith at the City of Edmonds, and I've got a big ask. I want a variance. I want this. I want that. But I show up with the latest fishing lure, salmon fishing lure, because it's his currency. He loves salmon fishing, and every time I'm going, okay, give me the fish report, tell me what's going on, and I got to know. I know you were out this last week. What have you caught? Where did you catch it? And we always start there, and I go, well, I've heard. Now, not a fisherman that is like on your level, but I've heard, and I pull it out of my briefcase. I've heard this is killing them out there. Have you ever tried this? And oh my God, yeah, I've heard about this thing. Yeah, great. And it's a currency. Those sorts of things have created a bond that now we're working on solution-based thinking. We're working together versus two different people in two different worlds. This is all right out of your class. So now I'm going to take the primacy effect. I'm going to go all the way back to where we started. I know it was intentional, and assuming I was right, and assuming I told an absolutely accurate story of the first line I ever heard out of your mouth, it was the first day of class, the first line out of your mouth, and you delivered it very, very deliberately to a class of, I guess, undergraduates, for sure. I was a freshman. What were you trying to establish with that introduction? I am Herr Dr. Michael Shadow. If it's easier for your finite minds, you may call me God. I'm going to make you remember this, even if you don't.
Yes, Ed.
What did you have in mind with that?
Recollection is not perfect. So I do not recall that was the opening line. Okay. I do recall making a very similar statement, but it was later, talking about language and images, etc. So I cannot directly and truthfully answer what was going on in my mind.
Right, it's been a while.
It has been a while. But I'll tell you what the principle should have been. Well, what is the principle? And if that were my opening line, I violated the principle, okay? The first thing psychologically with any other person is you've got to acquire their what?
Attention.
You got it. So, and I think one of the best ways to do that is, of course, screaming obscenity at them as you start the negotiation at the first meeting. And you will have gained their what?
Attention and disapproval.
That's right. Right. So it's not the quality of attention that you really want.
Right.
So it's not acquire attention. It's acquire and at the same time focus the attention on something important to them. Therefore, any of my clients who say, I want to begin my remarks with a joke, I say, well, first of all, do you know how to tell a joke? Most of my clients don't. They're not good joke tellers.
They're not funny.
They're not funny, and they don't know about timing. They don't know about pausing, inflection, or anything. And the second is that the joke, even if well told and funny, if it's irrelevant to your topic, why you're there, the relationship, the issue, then there's a point at which you have to get back to point one. Oh, now to get serious. Well, if it's a good joke, they don't want to get serious. They want now to share their own jokes at the meeting. So psychologically, it's a misstep.
Right.
So if it's a joke, and I'm in favor of humor, it's got to be relevant to where you next want to go. So you're seamless.
Segue to where you're going.
Exactly. So it's acquire and focus attention all at the same time. And sometimes it's a story. It could be humor. It could be I'm hair doctor. And I do remember hair doctor, and excuse me, I should have prepared better for responding. I do remember saying those things. I just don't remember saying them as the opening frame.
You told me of a, and I don't know that it was a speech you gave, but you also spoke of a speech that somebody gave. Maybe you did give it, but where the topic, the persuasive speech was regarding gun control, and where somebody was going to give a talk regarding gun control, and as he caught his audience's attention, and at the very beginning of his speech, he in the podium he took out a firearm with shooting blanks and shot a couple rounds over the heads of his audience, and the entire audience was on the ground. And then he began the speech about gun control. I've never forgotten that one either, that this powerful entry, we have beginnings every day. We answer the phone. Calls go to our voicemail. We have these beginnings every day that should be and could be powerful introductions to, if nothing else, ourselves. Could be a proposition, could be something that they're calling, or a website. It's like, boom, it's a powerful entry. They are seeing it. Does it create the experience you're looking for it to create? All of those thoughts came from your teaching around persuasive speaking, around communication. Do you think in this day and age, what you teach, has it morphed towards digital communication, morphed towards internet-based communication? How do you see the skill set in that we live in a world of texting and acronym communication and communication that I believe it to be more rare to sit down and actually analyze a person, their situation, their audience. There's so much communication that goes on in ways that are not, I guess, the old-fashioned way.
Well, the technology has definitely broadened, in many ways changed the attitude about communication.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, the technology has taken us back to an older period where shorter is better, crisper, because of sound. One of the differences between sound communication and written communication is simply that with sound, shorter is better. With print, lengthy and analysis are possible. I hope I'm stating this clearly. Right now, the technology pushes toward short responses on whatever platform you're on. The technology is not particularly good in communicating extended analysis. And so a lot of the postings I see are more oral in style. They're crisp statements. I won't even go into the fact that they may be hateful, accusatory, in bad taste, etc. But we are developing a shorter form of communication, which is different from the earlier part of last century or the century before that, where print was considered the dominant form, and that was the form of analysis. It was the form of critical thinking, and we're not doing that much anymore. Newspapers are tremendously in decline in terms of use. Everything is going digital, which means shorter, crisper, in and out.
I think it's fascinating to with these basics and seeing how important they are to sort of track how are they being tended to, these basics of connection and audience and language of who we're speaking with, and how it's evolving in an era that face-to-face seems to be changing dramatically. COVID, with everything being on Skype, and you get this little tiny picture of somebody, and they check in and out. It's the whole world of audience has changed its look, and I'm really interested in how it progresses. I intend to keep the tools in play. I believe in the tools. I believe in the tools of communication that you've taught so well. Dr. Shadow, you have published one official book in your life, and that's your PhD thesis. And I know for a fact it's published because I have a bound copy, and so do you.
Yes, I actually have two.
Yes.
I inherited one from my mother.
Yes.
She also had one.
Yes.
So there are three out there.
There's three out there. But for some reason, I get asked a lot, why haven't you written many, many books on communication, negotiation, argumentation, rhetoric? Why haven't you written so many books?
I'm terrified of print. I am very comfortable in sound communication.
Right.
But in my brain, once it's there on, I'll say, paper, old-fashioned as I am, or in a digital format, there's permanency there. The new contemporary technology has not changed that in my brain. I mean, I know there's a delete, backup space. I can erase. But my attitude toward print is still based on decades and decades and a century ago. Once it's in print, it's permanent. It's there. And that terrifies me.
And you choose to be more dynamic and flexible with your ongoing thinking.
And sound communication is my preferred mode. Thank God for my PhD master teacher, Dr. Marie Hockmuth-Nichols at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. She forced me to write my dissertation. I mean, it took me 4 years to write the role of the ancient persuasive speaker in the transmission of collective wisdom from Homer to Isocrates. Took me 4 years. It should have taken 2. But my dislike of putting everything on paper and thinking there's someone somewhere who can say, well, that's not completely true.
Right.
I don't believe that.
A lot of correcto type you used in backing up.
Oh, yes. Again and again.
Yeah.
So it's a mental thing.
Well, and you refer to some publications. One you mentioned earlier, Saldini in Persuasion.
Yes.
Is a tremendous book. You've told me to read that. I've read it a dozen times. But I do hear what you're saying, and in part, too, going into the consulting business of, okay, we want to hire you because of what you know. In part, I think that if there was a book that someone could buy for $40, they might just do that. You know, I have the similar sort of, you know, I'm in a strange place with putting things in writing. But I have also, thanks to you, been able to record some of the things you have graciously done for us. Our time in Aruba.
Yes.
And that seminar with alumni is recorded. It's amazing. A seminar you and I were able to do together, which I keep hearing about. It was just a great day in Portland of sort of the theory and the teaching and the street application of it, at least how I've interpreted it. That's been a tremendous recording. And to have you here at the opening of this podcast and to be a part of this initial journey, wherever it takes us, what an incredible privilege. Every podcast we've framed is going to have an ending with a consider. This is very different. And I read something, and the minute I read it, I thought, oh my gosh, this is Dr. Michael Shadow. And this is Fitzgerald's description of The Great Gatsby. And I want to read it to you as almost how I feel about you and what you do to me and the people around you. I'm going to read it to you. This is Fitzgerald describing Gatsby in his book, The Great Gatsby. He smiled understandingly, much more than understandingly. It was one of those rare smiles with a quality of eternal reassurance in it that you may come across 4 or 5 times in a life. It faced, or seemed to face, the whole eternal world for an instant, and then concentrated on you with an irresistible prejudice in your favor. It understood you just as far as you wanted to be understood, believed in you as you would like to believe in yourself, and assured you that it had precisely the impression of you that at your best you hope to convey. Gatsby had an ability to read his audience, and then he stood them up. I was a skinny kid from Edmonds who didn't know what the hell I wanted to do. I stumbled into real estate, and I got bombarded with Abe's philosophy, Tom Newman's finance wisdom, and you being an advocate to my skills in communicating and negotiating. And those three things, 48 years later, have served me my entire life. And I think it's pretty awesome that, I've got a goal. I want to somewhere when we hit our 50th, which is in, 26, September of 26, we're going to forget all this discussion. We're just going to go drink a lot of wine and just celebrate 50 years of staying in touch. But it was because you invested in me in this very personal way. And all the years we spent together in academia and staying in touch since then, It's been an incredible journey. And I know that what you have taught me lives on in so many of my students. I mean, I preach it like the Bible. I do, that this is important and pay attention. And there's some that have become absolute experts at it, better than I will ever be. They've absorbed it. They've listened to your stuff. They've really become expert communicators and negotiators. And that's really comes from you. It went through me. Believe me, they're like my kids, and I'm eating their dust, and it's great. And so, huge thanks for all these years and your expertise and all the places we've been. And I've got this visual of you in Las Vegas in this dramatic pointing to the crowd. And I remember standing in the back going, wow, give it to them. Do it. And so we've had a great journey.
That it has been.
Yeah.
And thank you for it.
Thank
you for allowing me
Yeah.
to be part of your journey.
Yeah.
And I think, I know, one of your great gifts is your ability to take an idea and apply it. Who would have thunk
No one.
that in a class of the rhetoric of Western thought, the Greek rhetorical section, that there would be any relevance to what a college freshman was doing selling real estate?
Yeah.
Well, you thought it. You realized it. And that's the dynamic, transformative kind of thinking you do. And you nurture others and train them to also open up that way. Look beyond the labels. Go into the idea, the concept, and say, can I make it fit into my life? How does this play into my life? So,
Well,
thank you.
I'm going to give the credit back out to you that your dynamic, charismatic ability wrecked me forevermore with instructors, teachers, professors. It to this day is just, it's an unattainable reference. And so it was because of your ability to incite enthusiasm and passion and relevance to these concepts that they stuck. I never wrote a note in your class. I didn't need to. I remembered every word you said. And I mean it. I remembered it because of your ability to communicate so clearly and in almost, it was an almost entertaining experience. It was getting a front row seat. here it is. What's going to happen today? Oh gosh, you have no idea how many times I've sat through some continuing education class or something, and you just go, oh my God, how am I going to last for 50 minutes with this? And it becomes a reference to, this can be done well by a master, and I've seen it. And I become intolerant of just boring, terrible lecturing type communication. You made learning so fun. And again, for me, I couldn't have written a title that would have sounded more relevant to my life than that title, and yet somehow it's become my life. How ironic is that?
Yes.
It's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Dr. Shadow. We're going to leave from here and have some good dinner and some good wine. And thank you again all for listening to this great podcast. Until we meet again, God bless you all.